I'm Reina Takahashi. I am a freelance paper artist out in the Bay Area, San Francisco. And what that means is I'm making a lot of things out of paper. So that could be images that are used on editorial websites or on publications in print magazines or book covers, or sometimes I even do backdrops, so you see the paper stuff live. But basically any kind of art piece that's made out of paper, that's my wheelhouse.
My name is Shiu Pei Luu, and I am an illustrator art director from Oakland, California. And I have the privilege of working on Messenger Kids as the art director. So we help create 3D effects and AR effects for our young demographic of users. It's an incredibly fun job, and it's a privilege to do it. Outside of work, I have the opportunity to run a company with my best friend, and it's called the Beehive Society. And we are in the business of creating pop-up art shows that showcase amazing artists from the Bay Area, such as Reina, who's been in a few of our shows. But yeah, it's just a fun reason to share art, drink with your friends, have a party around a bunch of fun pop culture art.
Yeah, the best kind of art parties. Should we kick off with questions?
Yeah, since you started with the intros, I will ask the questions first. One of the things that I have always wanted to know about you is, what is your creative activity that you go to do that is not your main creative media? So non-paper related.
Non-paper. Okay, so one thing that I started doing a lot once I went freelance and I wasn't working full-time going to an office is cooking. So originally I wouldn't have thought of cooking as super creative, but now that I'm like going to the farmer's market and seeing what's fresh that week and then cooking things up for the week, it's definitely creative in my mind because it's sort of an improv type of thing to be like, oh yeah, the peppers look good, and then just chop it up and figure out what I can make with it. These aren't very complex or very like high level, like advanced skill kind of things, but it's really nice to kind of make time for myself and then use my creative brain differently and have a meal at the end of it. So,
were you not cooking as much prior? Like, did you just start learning how to cook, or is this?
I actually cooked a lot so let's see, 5 years ago, I lived in Chicago by myself and I cooked a lot when I was there. You know, I had my own kitchen and I was cooking a lot then. And then I guess more recently, when I was working full time, I had a longer commute, so it was harder to make myself cook, I guess. And now it's just an enjoyable activity.
Do you ever cut like vegetables and fruit into things, like treat it like paper and turn it into sculptures?
Maybe in my next life or my next career.
Just wondering.
Just really mix the two together.
Yeah, bring it together. I don't know, you have a ton of food in all of your artwork too, so it makes sense.
Yes, I do love to eat. So food is a huge theme in my work. Yeah.
Inspirational. I don't know, that's like everything. I feel like my go-to as well, like drawing food is so much easier than drawing some other more complex
the stuff you
thing.
want to eat.
Yeah. I know, that's like all I draw when I travel is like food.
Yeah, I can totally respect that. All right, are you ready for your question?
I am.
Okay.
Hit me, Reina.
So one thing that I have noticed about you as we've become friends is that you are amazing at kind of coming up with ideas all the time, just bubbling over with them, you know, about artwork, art shows, getting people together around art. And so, for example, the Beehive Society. So what would be your best advice for taking one of those ideas and bringing them to life?
Oh, man. Actually, Reina, you were part of the Beehive Society growing. Some backstory is Reina actually introduced me to one of our collaborators who owned this amazing space in Soma, who we ended up having a ton of gallery shows there through. But yeah, it's like a few things of moving forward is like getting ideas from different people, like sharing that idea and putting it out into the world. One, I think I shared it with you and you're like, yeah, let's make this happen. And so you kind of added to our ideas. But when it's a really big, complex project, whether it's like an art show or, as Heather could attest to, a conference, or even like a large illustration paper project, I'm sure, I think about it as like a big project, but that's really scary. And so I figure out how to break it down into smaller, digestible parts that feel doable. And then at that point, you can also think about like, okay, is this a small enough project that I could hand off to somebody, right, and get help? Because a lot of these things, it's hard to do all by yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, like just thinking about a problem is as like almost like a tree of little projects that you have to do.
Tackle one leaf at a time.
Yeah. Or I mean, I'm sure you've built actually a tree out of paper before, so I'm sure it's a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I think a lot about illustrations too. Like when I'm designing illustrations, is thinking about it in pieces. Visually, what do I want the big piece to be? And then breaking it down as well. And then going through a process.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I think with shows, like the Beehive shows, like we have a process now. And also being incredibly organized about your process is super helpful too. Like we live and die by our spreadsheets and our notes and like our emails to one another. Yeah.
That's such another side to being an artist that people don't talk about too.
Yeah.
Is like that organization and like,
yeah,
kind of more of the rigid stuff.
Yeah, but it's such a misconception. I feel like everyone's like, oh, artists love blue sky design. Actually, it's kind of terrifying for me when people are like, do whatever you want. And I'm just like frozen, like,
oh yeah, totally.
I need specs.
Yeah, the designer in me totally
Yeah.
likes constraints.
Right?
Like, I love that.
I mean, I think like constraints is this really interesting thing where I think it kicks off a lot of creativity, right? Because like even with Beehive shows, we probably unnecessarily put constraints on ourselves where it's like, this is our budget, we can't go over this, and then that ends up driving a lot of decisions as well, which I'm sure you do as well, right? For like any of your illustrations, your 100-day projects, you were whipping those things out like crazy, and I had no idea.
Well, the constraints helped because I knew it had to be a breakfast, and so like even just having that was enough to be like, okay, today is eggs. I'm making those.
That's awesome. Okay, I have another question for you. So one of the things, going back to how prolific you incredibly, like you just create work. It's nuts. Like following your Instagram, I literally am always like, how does she find time for this? But you're always making. So I've run into creative blocks before where it's like, I literally don't know what to do. I don't know what to make today. So how do you know you're experiencing creative block? And two, what do you typically do to get yourself out of it?
Okay.
Sorry, that was 2 questions. I know.
We'll call it a 2-part question.
Okay.
We'll allow it. So I think to me, it's fairly obvious when I'm in a creative block because I just don't feel like making that day, and that sucks. It's just not fun, you know, and there are just times when it's really hard to get motivated. And so that's how I know it's that feeling of like, oh, why don't I want to do this thing that I love to do, you know?
Yeah.
But I think we also set up ourselves to have this expectation that we're always creative. But I don't think that's fair because being creative is also part of your job. And, you know, you can't always do your job 100%, you know, 24/7 all the time. So to combat creative block, I kind of have 2 different paths. They're very opposite. So the first one is to do something else. So, you know, if I don't feel super creative that day, I try not to pressure myself into feeling like I should be. And then that might be a day where I go on a bike ride and go to the park or cook something or go to yoga or kind of do these things that I wouldn't equate to being like part of my job. And so that's one way, is to do something different, or maybe even doing something that's a different creative thing. Like I took an embroidery class for a night and just tried doing something else that wasn't my main expertise. That's one way, is to completely veer off and do something else.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the opposite, where sometimes it is more that I just can't get myself to start working. And so if that's the case, then that might be when I start a 100-day project or a 30 days of something project, where it holds me accountable to actually making something that day. And so I have this sort of superficial thing project where I'm like, oh, people know that I'm doing this project, so I have to do it. And then that is enough to kind of like push me into sitting down on my chair and actually getting ready to cut stuff.
Oh my gosh. I feel like you've gotten me out of some of those creative funks where I think I was doing a 100-day project, which I'm still doing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Raina, I don't have it in me. And you're like, no, you do. Just like start sketching, just start doing it. So yeah, I think that's awesome that you like have ways out of your
funk. And as my mom would say, she was like, it's the 100-day project. You don't have to do it in 100 days. It's making something for 100 days. It doesn't have to be continuous, right? So you end up with 100 pieces, but it might take 200 days. Who cares, you know?
Or 1,000 days,
Yeah.
or 2 years. I don't know. This is literally the same like pep talk she gave to me. And so, yeah, I think people have to hear that. It is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, no, it totally is. So,
and like their day to day gets in the way, and you're just like, oh, you get home, like, I don't have the strength for this today. And I love what you said, where it's like you should be forgiving of yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's really hard.
You're allowed to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. We do put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
I know,
make
undue pressure, right?
Oh
like it's kind of made up.
We totally did that with ourselves with like the Beehive too. And like we had to step back and say like, this is for fun. Like if we're not having fun, we have to like reconsider how hard we're pushing ourselves. And so yeah, for us, that's the bar. It's like, are we having fun? If we are, great, keep doing it.
That's amazing criteria to live by.
Well, I mean, it doesn't pay the bills, but it definitely does help to just slow down and remind yourself, where it's like the whole point of this, like it's not for anyone, it's for us. Like we're taking on these passion projects, like 100-day project, or like putting together an art show.
Yeah,
it's to enjoy what you're doing.
It's fun.
Yeah, for sure. Oh gosh, sorry, I like derailed the questioning. Is it my turn or yours?
I think no, it's my turn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This just turned into a conversation.
No, I'm having fun.
Okay, good.
Okay. So one thing that I admire about the way that you work is that you're very inclusive of all kinds of different like team members, whether they are art-oriented professions or not. And I think that's sort of a requirement of your job as well, is to be able to work with, you know, like data scientists or engineers and like include them in the conversation. And I think you're really good at that. How do you do it? Like, how do you work with people outside of the creative art realm?
It's so funny. I think this conversation comes up a lot. I think with creatives, it's like, oh, I'm right-brained, I'm left-brained, right? Or people are like, I can't draw to save my life. And I just don't believe that. Like, my background was actually in civil engineering. And so a lot of project management and a ton of math, and I am an artist now. And so like, it is possible artists do know math. And in fact, like some of like the most amazing artists I know, they are basically running their own businesses, much like you. So you are doing your own accounting, I'm sure. So yeah, I think I want that myth to be dispelled when people are like, I'm right-brained or left-brained. But one of the things I think that I really recognize is like whether someone is really considered technical or artistic, our processes are actually really similar, right? The way we think is really similar. It's that same sort of, we're both trying to solve a really ambiguous problem, and like, how do we break it down and how do we help one another? And some of the work, discovering what work has gray spaces where my work is basically overlapping with yours. Like that's such a great time to partner up. Also being willing to take a moment and listen and really, really understand, instead of going into like a conversation with somebody that may have a really different background than you, saying like, okay, I just need you to do this and this for me, but slowing down and being like, but where can I help you and get you halfway here? That's where I've seen the most successful projects are, especially with developing and building apps or creating artwork that is digital. Like you do have to recognize that like your work as an artist is contributing to that of an engineer, a designer, developer, and their work, you're hyper reliant on their work, they're reliant on yours as well. So yeah, I think that humbles me a lot, where it's like, my work can't exist without your work, and your work doesn't have a visual or existence without my work. So really,
it's a mutual need of each other.
Totally. You know, and it's pretty amazing, like when you sit down and start talking to somebody who is like writing JavaScript or coding, their problem solving is really, really similar to that of the design process and the artistic process as well. But yeah.
I love that.
Hopefully that's helpful. I don't know if I gave you any clarity.
No, totally. It just makes me think that everyone is working towards the same goal, but you have different approaches for getting there. And if you don't communicate well, then that goal is not going to be achieved.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's like when I've seen projects derail is when everyone is like out for themselves, right? It's like, I just have to deliver this. But going back to the specs that you were talking about that we should be considering, like really important to slow down and talk to those team members of like, hey, what are specs that I should consider for you? Because here are some specs that you need to consider for me, right? That's like when I've seen the most successful products come up, is when you've kind of humanized it, and you're like, how do I make your life a little bit easier so you can make my life a little bit easier?
Having space for other people.
Right, 100%. I think that communication comes down to it, and just being open to that communication.
Nice.
Let's see. One of the things that I fall into patterns and processes a lot. In fact, I rely on them quite a bit for when I'm creating. Like, I know just like my illustration development process is literally the same every time. It's like thumbnails, rough sketch, color pass, like, you know. So I think it's super easy to fall into patterns and processes throughout like our days and weeks, whether that be the way we work or just like what we do on a day-to-day basis. How do you break from that and then remain inspired? Because literally like every piece of artwork I see you create, it's like, oh my gosh, where did that idea come from? That seems so out of left field. So what keeps you inspired?
Oh man, this is a common question, but it's actually a hard question.
It is hard. Yeah, I agree.
I don't do anything really special, I guess.
That's clearly not true.
Well, no, like in terms of like, oh, I'm gonna gather inspiration today.
No.
Or it's not very intentional that way. And we've talked about this before, where I feel like both of us make art so frequently that it's almost part of our like innate brain waves, or like it's always somewhere in the back of our heads. So I guess I would say that, you know, my days aren't that exciting. There are a lot of like very mundane things, but I think because I'm looking at a lot of things through that lens of how can that intersect with my art, or what would it be like if that thing was made out of paper?
Yeah.
You know, actually, like my friends always make fun of me because I'll be out with them and be like, oh, look at that mountainscape. What if it was made out of paper, or it looks like paper? And they're just like,
you're always on.
I'm like paper glasses, basically.
Which you've made paper.
Yeah, I definitely have. Glasses are really hard to make, actually.
I would imagine bikes would be really tough.
Oh, yeah, so complicated.
There's a lot of parts.
So just, I guess, that openness, or that lens that you can carry around each day, throughout your day, and thinking about like anything really boring or like eye-catching or whatever throughout your day. Like, I notice a lot of things in nature. Yeah. So walking around and I'm like, oh, look at that flower, or look at this color, or look at that. You know, it's like pretty Do you feel like that was developed,
or did you always have that eye where you're like, that couch, I'm gonna make it out of paper, or like I want to draw that, or did this take time or an experience?
I guess like once I started making out of paper, you know, I spent a few years sort of building up that foundational skill, and that was what was inspiring to me, was like, what can paper do? And then after that, it was not to say that I've like accomplished that completely or anything. Like, there's always stuff that I'm learning about the medium. But now, in addition to that, it's sort of like, okay, everyday life times paper. Like, what does that look like? And so, you know, I think it's really just a lens or a frame, and it's kind of more exciting to go about my day-to-day thinking about that stuff, or even just like conversations and like, oh man, you mentioned this like one project that someone's doing, so I'll check it out. And that's more of a direct inspiration of like, oh, this person's doing something really cool. And it could be art related, it could be science related, or something like, how does that mix with paper, you know?
So when you see something, I know I'm going off script again, and I'm sorry. When you see something like a leaf or something, how do you figure out how to create that in paper? Are you just going home and experimenting? Are you looking up tutorials? Like, I don't even know if there are tutorials out there, but like, yeah, how does it go from visually seeing it to something that is made in paper?
So the way that I used to work when I first started out was to try to emulate the actual form as close as possible, where I had a lot of fun being like, okay, here's this leaf with all of these ridges. Like, can I make a paper thing that looks exactly like it? Or like almost like you could mistake one for the other. And then now what's been really fun is sort of mixing in more of my design and illustration background and saying like, okay, what are the minimum number of aspects of that, features of that leaf that I can put into this paper thing to still read as a leaf? So it's a little bit more deductive, like taking things away. And it's very like graphic design-y that way, I guess. But that's
like giving it your spin on like the silhouette of it.
Exactly. Like, cool. How can I still have the leafiness of it, but not include all of the details? So that's been really fun for me lately.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like you see an illustrator, like if it's a 2D illustrator, like their style kind of change and grow, and like you get to watch that with your work too, I think, in paper. That's super cool. I know. I need to peruse more of your art pieces recently to see the changes.
Yeah, it's actually changed quite a bit, even between 2 100-day projects that I've done.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been fun. It's nice to see old work and be like, oh, I don't do that anymore. Yeah. Or like I do things differently.
It's also really cool. I don't know if you've ever experienced this where you travel or you do something, you have an experience and then you see your artwork like in your sketchbook or in your Instagram, suddenly like the style starts changing. Yeah. I love being able to like look through people's Instagrams and seeing like when did that happen and what happened in your personal life? You're so data oriented. Oh my God, you make me sound super creepy. But yeah, I guess I'm just creeping.
Like, how does that coincide with a life event or like
interesting.
Travel?
You're dating someone new. I noticed you had a change in your sketch style.
That's interesting.
I don't know. I think I have seen that before with people.
Really?
Yeah, like they start dating another illustrator or a designer, and it's like, oh, your styles are starting to like, you're adopting and getting influenced.
That's cool.
Style.
I like that.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
All right. I think this is the final question.
Oh, okay.
Because we have 3 each.
Okay.
Right?
I think I went over 3. Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
I got a lot of questions.
I got a lot in me.
I have a lot to learn.
Okay. So this is kind of a bigger question, but what are you excited about right now?
Oh, man. I know with the world the way it is, sometimes it is disheartening. However, one of the things I am really excited about is kind of the movements that are happening with designers, illustrators, and makers that are people of color as well as women. It's been really amazing to see how these tough conversations are manifesting themselves into art pieces and art movements. Yeah, it's been really great to see these communities come together and create art, incredibly powerful art that sometimes speaks way more volumes than just words. That's been really cool to see. And yeah, like the internet is this like amazing place. I know it's a tough and scary place out there, but being able to get access to that has been amazing. And just seeing the body of work from diverse groups, that has been really exciting for me. So I'm kind of keeping my finger on that pulse and seeing where that goes. And yeah, letting people have a voice artistically is so exciting to me. And so it's been great to see these communities pop up and be more vocal.
And everyone just coming together around those creative pieces or people. I've definitely been seeing that here.
Yeah.
It's really exciting.
It's actually, and it makes me think of like this place, like the Ruby, where it's put together and it's for women. And I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. Like women that are in the creative arts. So you get to meet these folks in the community. And yeah, I think that's what's really exciting. I hope to see it keep growing.
Yeah, I love that. Does that wrap things up?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. What else do you want to know? Is there anything else?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like us to touch on? Are you?
I just want to know how you both can work full time on your art, do creative jobs and then go home and manage to be creative at night as well. And, Chipoi, managed to run a nonprofit organization that has you be creative, and Reina, create all this paper art when you go home as well.
Yeah, I think it's like, how do you do it all? Having the office gig is tough. Like the commute, as Reina had mentioned, makes it really tough. It's being really intentional, I think, with your time and being forgiving of yourself sometimes when you like just don't have the energy for it and need to rest up. I think picking passion projects is super important. Like we were talking about earlier, it's like evaluating, is this project fun? Am I having fun? If I'm not having fun, allowing myself to just be like, cool, I'm going to take a break for a little bit until I find that inspiration and gusto again. But yeah, most of the time I've just, as I've worked longer, I'm recognizing how intentional it is for me to say yes or no to projects based off of like, does this fit into kind of like the principles of how I want to operate creatively, as well as how I want to spend my time. I usually take on a lot of projects if they involve like collaborations with like amazing artists and friends. God knows how many projects you and I have talked about, like wanting to collaborate on.
We gotta do this. Yeah, totally.
I know, even before this conversation, it's like, Reina, we have to plan an art show together. about food. It
Yeah,
really,
which would be so fun.
right? What about you, Raina? Like you are, like I said, you're crazy prolific. And so like, how do you do this 8 hours a day for clients and then go home and make stuff for yourself?
I guess it's kind of a mix. Like now that I'm a freelancer, my timelines are a little bit more flexible. Not to say that I can take time off at any point, which is a myth that people seem to have about freelancing. But there are pockets of time where I am waiting for feedback from a client, for example. So then I take those kind of pockets and put my side projects in there. And I haven't really been like pressuring myself to do stuff outside of the 9 to 5 because I'm able to work them in now. And in fact, it's nice to do the passion project that I had before as a full-time job, and then also have separation and do something else too.
Oh.
But when I was at an office gig, it was definitely around those projects like the 100-day project or having a deadline for myself, like a show like Beehive. That was a great project where it's like, I have to have an art piece done by this day or Shiu Pei will be very disappointed in me. So then, you know, that forces you to sort of make, I guess like for me, what keeps coming up is having these fake deadlines or these like fake accountability factors, to be able to sort of push through and do it. Because I was able to find time when I needed to, where it's like early before work or late after work or weekends and stuff like that.
Deadlines are important. There's always those projects where people are like, oh, whenever you want to turn it in. I'm like, cool, you're not going to. I guess you don't want it because I'm never going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But no, I think that's awesome. Like that accountability. I love that you put fake deadlines for yourself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, sometimes, I think that's putting those deadlines out there into the world and like that it commits you to them and it commits other people to expecting it when they're seeing you.
Yeah.
So
bringing in other people to be accountable. Yeah, that's definitely a good one.
All right. Okay. I guess I should adopt some of those principles.
You're so organized and you get stuff done.
Yeah. That's thoughtful that you think that. I know. Maybe we shouldn't plan projects. You're just going to give me all these crazy deadlines. No, but maybe I need this in my life.
Shiu Pei.
Yes, Raina.
Tell us about what you're doing at Weapons of Mass Creation Fest this year.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here this year. Oh my goodness. One, it's going to camp, which is, I love it. It's just very exciting. The community of WMC is amazing, of all these great designers. So I'm so excited to run a character design workshop because that's where my heart is. Oh my gosh, character design is just the best. It's so much fun. So we're going to run a workshop there. And then second, one of the talks that I'm going to be doing is design diversity. As you heard me speak a little bit earlier, like I think that's so important to make sure that different diverse groups are considered when you're thinking about design. I think it makes our design stronger. But yeah, I'm really excited to have a conversation with all the campers that are going to be at WMC.